Liam Prescott stood at the edge of the grand ballroom, a silent observer in a world that no longer thrilled him. The glittering chandeliers above resembling frozen constellations trapped in an artificial sky, their light as cold as the emptiness in his chest. The air hummed with soft, orchestral music, laughter, and shallow conversations from people who wore expensive smiles, hiding cheap intentions. But none of it touched him because beneath his tailored tuxedo and his billionaire title was a man still bleeding from a betrayal that had torn him apart. The memory of Victoria Monroe's laughter as she disappeared on the arm of his best friend weeks before their wedding gnawed at him like a parasite that refused to die. And while others saw wealth and charm, Liam carried scars invisible to the naked eye. Scars carved by broken trust and shattered dreams. And so tonight, he wasn't here for the usual games of pretense and power. Tonight, he sought something different, something that might numb the ache, even if only for a fleeting moment. Across the grand room, like a single drop of vivid crimson in a sea of glittering golds and blacks, stood Sienna Blake, her borrowed gown hugging her delicate frame like silk spun from courage and desperation, her emerald eyes scanning the grandeur around her with a mixture of awe and discomfort, knowing she didn't belong in this world, but forced by life's cruel hand to stand in it anyway. For her mother lay in a hospital bed, counting down days that neither hope nor prayers could extend without money. Money she didn't have. Her job as a waitress barely covered rent, let alone the towering medical bills suffocating her each month. But tonight offered a sliver of impossible opportunity. And as her gaze met Liam's piercing blue eyes from across the crowded floor, an invisible thread pulled them together, weaving fate's first dangerous stitch into their lives. His steps were slow, deliberate, every movement echoing confidence and mystery as he approached her, his presence commanding the air around him like gravity bending light. And when he finally stood before her, his voice was smooth, rich, and devastatingly calm. Care to make a deal for one night? No strings attached? Words that hung in the space between them, like a forbidden fruit daring to be plucked. Sienna's heart pounded against her ribs, her breath hitched, and though instinct screamed to turn away, desperation whispered louder, reminding her of her mother's pale face and the final notice letters stacked on their tiny kitchen counter. One night, she repeated softly, almost as though saying it made it real, her voice a fragile thread trying not to snap under the weight of shame and uncertainty. Liam's nod was subtle but firm, his hand producing a sleek black folder from his jacket, offering her a contract, clinical, cold, yet strangely respectful, as if providing her a clear choice rather than manipulation. And while her hands trembled holding the pen, Sienna saw not just dollar signs, but her mother's fragile smile flashing through her mind, fueling the resolve she never knew she had. And with one final breath, she signed the agreement that would forever alter the course of two broken souls. Liam gently closed the folder, slipping it back into his jacket with the ease of a man accustomed to transactions. But beneath his composed exterior, a storm quietly brewed, because as he looked at Sienna, this beautiful, vulnerable stranger whose bravery humbled him, he felt an unfamiliar crack in the fortress of emotional detachment he had meticulously built. Sienna tried to steady herself, pushing down the tidal wave of fear and uncertainty as she followed him past curious glances and whispered judgments of the elite who feasted on scandals like vultures circling the weak. But none of it mattered now, for she had made her choice, and as the elevator doors closed behind them with a metallic sigh, sealing them away from the world, both Liam and Sienna stood on the edge of something neither of them fully understood. Yet both could feel its electric hum vibrating in the silence between them, as if destiny itself held its breath, waiting to unfold the story that had just begun. The elevator doors had barely whispered open when the first slivers of sunlight began to pierce through the towering glass walls of Liam's penthouse, casting golden rays that danced across the pristine marble floors and illuminated the silent room where Sienna sat perched at the very edge of the grand bed, her borrowed crimson gown now neatly folded beside her, like a fragile reminder of the impossible choice she had made hours earlier. while the cool morning air wrapped around her bare shoulders as if echoing the shivers of uncertainty coursing through her veins. Her heartbeat was unsteady, caught between the remnants of last night's surreal reality and the creeping dread of what this morning might bring. For she expected coldness. She expected the familiar sting of being discarded, as if she were nothing more than a transaction completed in the dark. But as Liam approached with quiet, deliberate steps, holding in his hand a simple envelope that carried the weight of her sacrifice, his voice broke through the silence like the softest caress. "I hope this helps your mother." And in that moment, the carefully held dam behind her eyes nearly burst. But Sienna willed her tears to retreat, knowing that breaking down now would only expose the vulnerability she had fought so hard to conceal. Her fingers trembled slightly as she accepted the envelope, clutching it like a lifeline while whispering a quiet, sincere, "Thank you," her voice barely audible but rich with the kind of gratitude words could never fully carry. But before she could rise, before she could slip away and bury the night beneath the weight of life's returning responsibilities, the heavy double doors of the bedroom flung open without warning, crashing against the walls as Richard Prescott, Liam's father, stormed inside like an uninvited storm cloud, his piercing eyes narrowing with venomous judgment as they locked onto Sienna, scanning her as though she were a stain upon the legacy he so fiercely protected, and his voice, sharp and laced with disdain, shattered the delicate morning air. "Is this the woman you've chosen to embarrass this family with?" Sienna's breath hitched, her pulse roaring in her ears as if every molecule of oxygen had been ripped from the room. And though she wanted to shrink beneath the weight of his gaze, she sat frozen, gripping the envelope as if it were armor. But Liam stepped forward, his jaw tightening, the tension radiating from his body like a man at war, not just with his father, but with generations of poisonous expectations. And for the first time in years, his voice emerged not as the polished son Richard had sculpted, but as the man Liam truly was. "She's not your concern." The words calm yet soaked in defiance that cracked the air like thunder. Richard's face darkened with rage, his mouth twitching in furious disbelief as he spat. "You're throwing away everything for this waitress?" But without waiting for a reply, he spun on his heel and stormed out, leaving behind an invisible wound that cut deeper than any knife. The silence that followed was suffocating, a tense vacuum where neither Liam nor Sienna moved, each drowning in their own swirling emotions, until finally Sienna rose, her heart pounding so fiercely she feared Liam could hear it, and as she took her first steps toward the door, desperate to escape the boiling shame and uncertainty threatening to unravel her, Liam reached out gently, his fingers brushing her arm with a tenderness that halted her retreat. His voice softened, carrying a vulnerability rarely granted permission to surface. "Would you consider staying longer?" And in those 6 words was a silent confession of his own internal battle, of a man who had spent years locking away his emotions only to find them breaking free now, unexpectedly, with her. Startled, Sienna turned to face him, her eyes wide, her voice barely a whisper as she asked, "Why?" Not because she didn't know, but because she needed to hear it spoken, needed to understand what she represented in this world that had no place for girls like her. Liam's breath caught as he struggled for words, his gaze lowering momentarily before rising to meet hers with a raw honesty that stripped away every layer of his carefully curated armor. "Because I can't explain it, but I feel something with you I never thought I could feel again." And though the words hung in the air like fragile glass, their weight was immense, crashing against every wall Sienna had built to protect her heart. She stood frozen, torn between fear and temptation, between self-preservation and the dangerous allure of what his words offered, a future she never dared to imagine. And though every fiber of logic urged her to walk away, to bury this night and its dangerous aftermath deep within her, his voice followed her like a soft echo as she finally turned toward the door, her steps hesitant but determined, her mind swirling with questions and emotions she couldn't yet name. And as the doors slid closed behind her, sealing her once again from his world, his words clung to her like a haunting melody she would carry long after the morning light faded. The days that followed unfolded with a heavy, unspoken tension, each hour stretching endlessly as Liam wandered through the towering emptiness of his glass-walled mansion, its polished surfaces and cold elegance mocking the hollowness that echoed inside him. For no amount of luxury could fill the void Sienna had left behind when she walked out of his life that morning. Her absence gnawed at him like a relentless whisper in the back of his mind, invading his solitude with flashes of her emerald eyes and the soft tremble of her voice. And though business meetings came and went, contracts were signed and deals closed with the usual efficiency, none of it stirred him the way it once did, as though a vital piece of his existence had slipped quietly through his fingers. At night, when the world outside his penthouse slept, the loneliness grew louder, its voice wrapping around him like a cold wind that no amount of blankets could silence. And though he tried to drown it with expensive scotch and the flickering glow of late-night city lights, her memory always found its way back, tugging at him with invisible threads he couldn't sever. After countless restless nights, Liam could no longer ignore the magnetic pull drawing him to her, and one evening, with a restless ache burning inside his chest, he found himself standing outside the small diner where Sienna worked, its neon sign flickering slightly against the twilight sky, casting a warm, modest glow that contrasted sharply with the polished world he came from. Through the window, he watched her move gracefully between tables, balancing trays and offering tired smiles to customers who rarely noticed the quiet strength behind her gentle demeanor. And as he stood there, witnessing the resilience etched into every delicate movement, a wave of protectiveness surged through him. She deserved so much more than this harsh world had offered her. When her shift finally ended, she stepped outside, surprised to see him waiting beneath the soft hum of the streetlights, and her eyes widened in both curiosity and apprehension as she softly gasped, "Liam, what are you doing here?" His voice, calm yet vulnerable, broke the fragile barrier between them as he replied, "Offering you a job." And though his words hung in the air with tempting promise, Sienna instinctively braced herself, suspicion flickering across her features, unsure whether this was another transaction wrapped in softer language. Reading her hesitation with painful clarity, Liam quickly added, "It's strictly professional, but I want you close." His tone laced with a quiet plea that revealed far more than the words themselves. The conflict raged silently within her. Pride and fear battled against necessity and the undeniable curiosity that tugged at her heart. For despite everything, she couldn't deny the strange connection that lingered between them like a song that refused to fade. Her mother's mounting medical bills whispered harsh realities into her ears, and after a long pause, she nodded softly, her voice steady but cautious. "All right, I'll do it." Sealing a new chapter, neither fully understood. The days that followed saw Sienna stepping into Liam's world, not as a contract-bound stranger, but as his personal assistant, walking beside him through marble corridors and towering boardrooms, where ruthless businessmen and polished executives bowed to his authority. Yet behind closed doors, she quickly saw the cracks in his seemingly invincible exterior. The late nights spent staring into empty glasses, the haunted look in his eyes when no one else was watching, and the quiet sighs that slipped from his lips when he thought himself alone. Beneath the tailored suits and sharp commands was a man suffocating under the weight of legacy and betrayal, still carrying the fresh wounds carved by those who once promised loyalty but delivered treachery instead. As she organized his meetings, managed his overflowing schedule, and offered silent support during tense negotiations, Sienna found herself drawn deeper into the quiet storm that was Liam, each shared glance and unspoken moment weaving invisible threads between them that neither dared name, yet both felt pulsing beneath the surface. And in the stolen fragments of their days, when their hands brushed accidentally while passing documents, when their eyes locked across the gleaming desk, when soft conversations drifted into personal confessions, the fragile beginnings of something neither had planned began to bloom, a silent, dangerous intertwining of two hearts that fate had already begun to bind together. The delicate balance they had carefully begun to build was soon threatened by forces neither of them fully anticipated, as though fate itself resented the fragile peace they had found within each other's presence. And while Sienna became Liam's quiet sanctuary, offering him comfort in ways he never thought possible, and he in turn shielded her from the ruthless storms of his elite world. Their temporary calm was brutally shattered on the night of the Prescott Foundation's Grand Charity Gala, where crystal chandeliers glittered like frozen stars above the sea of carefully curated smiles and whispered judgments. And as Sienna stepped into the ballroom beside Liam, her elegant gown flowing like liquid midnight, she felt the weight of countless eyes upon her. Some curious, some envious, many quietly cruel, but none more piercing than the cold gaze of Victoria Monroe, who emerged from the crowd like a venomous ghost from Liam's haunted past, her arm linked possessively through that of Marcus Lowell, Liam's fiercest business rival and a man known for his ruthless ambition. Victoria's crimson lips curved into a cruel smile as she glided toward Sienna, her voice a syrupy dagger laced with venom as she whispered, "You're just a temporary amusement, darling. Trust me, I know Liam better than anyone. Don't fool yourself into thinking you're special." And though Sienna stood tall, her heart trembled beneath the weight of the insult, her confidence cracking like fragile porcelain under the sharp sting of comparison to a woman who once knew Liam in ways she hadn't dared to yet. But before Victoria's poison could seep any deeper, Liam stepped forward with eyes blazing and a voice as sharp as broken glass. "Don't speak to her like that," his words slicing through the tension as murmurs rippled through the surrounding crowd. Yet even as Victoria's mocking smirk faded, Marcus leaned in close, his voice low and filled with dark amusement as he whispered into Liam's ear, "You can't run from your family's scandal forever. You know the truth about your mother's death is still hidden." And in that instant, Sienna saw something terrifying flicker across Liam's face, a flash of deep-rooted pain and unresolved torment that paled his complexion and stole the strength from his stance, as though an invisible hand had reached into his chest and gripped his heart with icy fingers. Sensing his unraveling, Sienna gently reached for his hand beneath the cover of the tablecloth as they excused themselves from the gathering storm of curious onlookers, retreating into the dim sanctuary of the mansion's private terrace where city lights glittered like distant stars. And in the quiet space between them, Liam's shoulders sagged under the unbearable weight of his secret as his breath grew shallow, eyes shimmering with the threat of tears long suppressed. The words escaped him in a broken whisper, each syllable slicing through the night air like jagged glass. "My mother. She didn't die naturally, Sienna." And as his voice wavered, he looked into her eyes, searching for the judgment he so deeply feared, yet never found. "My father. He drove her to it. His greed, his cold ambition, his complete disregard for anything but power. He broke her. He crushed every ounce of light she had until she saw no way out but death. And I," his voice cracked, "I was too young, too helpless to save her. I've carried that guilt every day since," his confession spilling out like a dam finally broken, releasing years of suffocated grief and silent torment. Sienna's breath caught in her throat, her own eyes welling with unshed tears as she reached for his trembling hands, her fingers lacing through his with unwavering tenderness. And in a voice as soft as silk, yet stronger than steel, she whispered, "You are not your father, Liam. You never were, and you never will be. I see you for who you are, a man who carries burdens too heavy for one heart, but still chooses kindness over cruelty. You are more than the darkness that haunts you." Her words wrapping around him like a balm to his wounded soul, offering a salvation he never dared hope for. And in that moment, as her thumbs gently brushed away the tears, now falling freely down his cheeks, Liam wept. Not just for his mother, not just for the years of guilt and anger, but for the strange, unexpected grace of the woman who now sat before him, who saw the broken man beneath the billionaire's mask and chose to stay. Not out of obligation or pity, but out of something far deeper, something neither of them yet dared to name. The seasons shifted like silent chapters turning in their story, and as autumn painted the world in shades of amber and gold, Liam and Sienna found themselves cocooned in a delicate world of their own making, where the heavy burdens of the past softened beneath the gentle rhythm of their growing affection. And though shadows still lingered in quiet corners of their hearts, they discovered that, together, the darkness seemed less suffocating, the pain more bearable. Liam, once imprisoned by the weight of old wounds, now breathed easier in Sienna's presence, her laughter filling the empty spaces in his life with light he never thought he'd feel again. While Sienna, who had once only known struggle and survival, felt herself blooming under the quiet strength of Liam's unwavering care, his blue eyes always finding hers with a tenderness that made her heart race and settle all at once. One crisp weekend, Liam whisked her away to his secluded lakeside cabin, hidden beneath towering pines that whispered ancient secrets in the wind. The tranquil waters shimmering beneath the soft glow of the moon, casting silver trails across its surface like delicate lace. Inside, the warmth of a crackling fire wrapped around them as they sat close beneath layers of soft woven blankets, their fingers intertwined, their hearts beating to an unspoken melody only they could hear. Liam's gaze lingered on her, tracing the contours of her face as though memorizing every delicate detail. And in a voice hushed and reverent, he whispered, "You've healed wounds I didn't even know existed," his words carrying the raw truth of a man who had been lost for far too long. Sienna's emerald eyes shimmered as she looked up at him, her voice as soft as falling snow as she replied, "And you've given me a strength I never believed I possessed." Her confession a fragile gift wrapped in vulnerability, drawn together by invisible threads of trust and unspoken promises. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle yet profound, not born from fleeting passion, but from a deep, abiding affection neither of them had ever known, a merging of two souls searching for home in each other's embrace. Liam's hand rose to caress her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear that had dared to fall, and with each word that followed, he built a bridge across all their fears, his voice trembling with sincerity as he murmured, "I don't want just one night with you, Sienna. I want every night, every sunrise, every breath you take to be beside me. I want a life, not a moment." His admission breaking the final walls that had once guarded his shattered heart. Sienna's own tears sparkled beneath the soft firelight, her voice a tender echo of his longing as she whispered back, "Then don't let me go," her words carrying the weight of surrender and trust. Under the vast canvas of the starlit sky, where constellations blinked like watchful guardians, they allowed their souls to intertwine, not in haste but in reverence, their embrace slow and reverent as they shared a night filled with whispered dreams, gentle touches, and silent vows that stitched their hearts together. The world outside their cabin ceased to exist, and in that sacred space of vulnerability and devotion, they discovered not just love, but healing, redemption, and the kind of peace neither had dared to believe in until now. As dawn crept across the lake, wrapping their tender night in golden promise, neither of them foresaw how quickly their fragile happiness would be tested by the merciless world outside their private haven. And as they returned to the city, their love still warm and raw, the storm waiting in the shadows finally struck with brutal force. Richard Prescott, his pride festering like an untreated wound, confronted his son with eyes blazing, his voice shaking the very walls of the Prescott estate as he thundered, "You will lose everything for this woman, Liam. The company, the legacy, your inheritance. Gone!" But Liam stood his ground, his voice fierce and unwavering as he shouted back, "I don't need your empire. I refuse to chain my life to a fortune soaked in manipulation and control. I would rather build my own world with someone who truly loves me than continue living in the prison you've designed." Yet Richard's fury was only the beginning, for Victoria, still bitter from her own failures, and Marcus, hungry for power, launched a ruthless smear campaign designed to destroy Liam piece by piece. Fabricated scandals flooded the media. Manipulated photos of Liam in compromising situations surfaced on every tabloid cover. Headlines screamed betrayal and deceit, and salacious rumors spread like wildfire through every social circle, twisting public opinion into a mob of judgment and ridicule. Reporters swarmed the gates of Liam's mansion, shouting invasive questions, their cameras flashing like lightning bolts, while paparazzi stalked Sienna with cruel persistence, turning every step she took into a public spectacle. Anonymous threats flooded her mailbox, venomous words accusing her of being a manipulative gold digger who had seduced her way into the Prescott fortune, while cruel strangers whispered behind her back, dissecting her every move with malicious glee. Each hateful letter, each anonymous call chipped away at Sienna's resolve, the pressure mounting like an unbearable weight crushing her chest. And though Liam tried desperately to shield her, to assure her that his love was stronger than the storm, the constant barrage wore her spirit thin, feeding her deepest fears that perhaps she was ruining the man she loved. One evening, as the city's skyline blinked indifferently beyond the glass windows, Sienna sat at Liam's grand mahogany desk, her hands trembling as she poured every ounce of her heartbreak into a letter that felt like a dagger slicing through her own chest. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything. You deserve better. I love you too much to be your downfall. Her tears staining the ink as she folded the note with trembling fingers and placed it gently on the polished surface, her suitcase already packed by the door. And when Liam returned to find the letter, his world collapsed into a hollow, suffocating silence, the kind that screams without sound, leaving only the echo of what was lost, as his hands clutched the fragile paper, his chest rising and falling in broken rhythm, his vision blurring from the tears he could no longer hold back. Knowing that the woman who had healed his soul was now gone, swallowed by the cruelty of a world that refused to let them be. The days dragged on like an endless winter, each moment without Sienna carving deeper wounds into Liam's soul. And though the world continued spinning, for him time felt frozen, as if life itself was holding its breath in her absence. He searched tirelessly, scouring every corner of the city, following every whisper of hope. But every door he knocked on led to silence, and every phone call ended with emptiness, as though she had vanished into the folds of the universe. Sleep eluded him, food lost its taste, and his once powerful empire felt meaningless without the woman who had breathed life back into his hollow existence. Yet love possesses a strange power to weave miracles into the most shattered of destinies, and it was during a charity gala, a place he only attended in a feeble attempt to escape the walls of his desolation, that fate finally whispered again. Across the vibrant room filled with laughter, music, and glittering gowns, his eyes locked onto a figure whose presence ignited the embers of his dying hope. A woman with familiar grace, her soft hair cascading like silk as she gently handed toys to children at the hospital fundraiser. Her smile kind but distant. It was Sienna, radiant even in simplicity, her beauty untouched by the storms they had endured. And before his mind could process it fully, his feet moved on their own, carrying him across the sea of strangers until he stood before her, breathless and trembling. Her wide eyes met his, emotions crashing in waves as she whispered his name like a prayer lost to time. And for a moment, neither spoke, their hearts communicating in the silence only true love can understand. Then, with a voice thick with longing, Liam spoke, his words heavy with the pain of separation and the relief of reunion. You left, but I never let you go, not for a single heartbeat, his voice breaking as his hands reached for hers. Tears welled in Sienna's eyes, glistening like morning dew as she confessed, I was afraid, Liam, afraid that staying would cost you too much, that loving me would strip you of everything you fought for, her voice shaking with raw honesty. But Liam, unable to hold back the tide of emotions, cupped her face with trembling hands, his thumbs softly brushing away the tears that spilled freely, his voice unwavering as he declared, Sienna, without you I am already poor. You are my everything.